imagine for a second that you're handed a set of blueprints. And these aren't blueprints for a building or like a new type of engine or even a weapon.
Right, something much worse.
Exactly. They are the structural schematics for an apex predator, like an alien entity that looks at the solid, unbreakable laws of physics, the very rules that keep your feet on the ground and the stars in the sky, and it treats them as nothing more than a mild suggestion.
A set of user terms and conditions that it can just, click accept and bypass completely.
Yes. And we have this comforting lie we tell ourselves when we encounter something that violently upends our understanding of biology. We call it a virus, or we call it a life form.
Right, because that puts it in a box we understand.
Exactly. We use these terrestrial familiar words because they make us feel safe. They make us feel like we are dealing with something that obeys the rules of the natural world, something we can fight with antibodies, or quarantine, or burn.
But that is the fundamental biology fallacy. And, we have to reject it right now. What we are looking at is not a virus.
It has no interest in your biology other than as raw material.
That false categorization is exactly what traps our thinking. You have to completely discard the concept of an infection. When this entity comes into contact with human biology, it doesn't infect you. It recompiles you.
It recompiles you. God, that's such a chilling way to put it.
But it's accurate. What we are analyzing is, in essence, an autonomous, transgalactic operating system. But it's not an operating system for software. It is an operating system for matter itself.
So it's hardware and software all at once.
Exactly. It is a piece of technology designed by a post-biological intelligence to act as a universal assembler. A machine that can just interface with any localized environment and rewrite the physical structure of that environment to serve, a predetermined set of instructions.
Which is why we aren't going to talk about the human drama today. We're not going to look at the political fallout of factions fighting over who gets to control this thing.
Right, that's just ants fighting over a microchip.
Completely oblivious to the circuitry they're standing on. We are going straight to the core. We are going to deconstruct the terrifying physics of a machine that views our Newtonian reality, the concepts of momentum, of inertia, of chemical bonds that we consider to be the absolute foundation of the universe, as just as programmable variables.
And to even begin to understand how it bypasses those variables, we have to start at the foundational level. Like, how does it actually execute its code on a planetary scale?
Right.
We have to look at the concept of matter not as a fixed state, but as a programmable medium. When you observe what happened during the disassembly of the Aero station and subsequently the disassembly of the ship over Venus, you aren't watching a biological plague.
No, you're watching a nightmare scenario of what material scientists call claytronics, but pushed to an impossible, almost godlike extreme.
Yeah, because the population of Aeros wasn't killed in any traditional sense. And I think that's the part that is hardest to wrap your mind around.
It wasn't a plague that wiped them out and left their bodies behind.
No, the horror of Aeros is that every single person, every trace of organic material, their DNA, their cellular structures, the bacteria in their guts, it was all utilized.
But it didn't kill them, because killing implies an end state.
Exactly, it repurposed them. The operating system looked at 1 million human beings, and it didn't see people. It saw a highly organized repository of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and complex proteins.
A massive parts bin.
A parts bin, yes. And it's simply used those parts to build a complex engine and a communication array.
And it achieved this through molecular nanotechnology. But to grasp the sheer terror and scale of this, we really need to differentiate between how human beings do chemistry and how this entity does chemistry.
Right, because human chemistry is fundamentally stochastic.
Stochastic meaning random, like probability-based.
Precisely. Think about how we manufacture chemicals or materials. We take a massive amount of molecules, we put them in a liquid or gas phase inside a vat, we heat them up to increase their kinetic energy, and then we rely on the statistical probability of random collisions to produce the desired molecular bonds.
We're essentially shaking a box of puzzle pieces and hoping they lock together.
It's chaotic. It's imprecise. We get byproducts, we get impurities. The entity, however, uses mechanosynthesis. It possesses Turing-complete computers.
Wait, hold on. Turing-complete computers, that is a massive phrase. Turing-complete usually refers to a computing system that can run any program if given enough time and memory, right?
Right.
Are you saying it has computers made out of chemicals?
I am saying the chemicals of the computer. It doesn't rely on random liquid phase collisions to build things. It uses precise mechanical orientation.
Wow.
Imagine microscopic robotic arms built out of molecules, physically grabbing individual atoms and snapping them into place to build flawless, super stiff diamondoid structures.
But wait, there were early theoretical criticisms of molecular nanotechnology in our own science, weren't there? Like, physicists brought up the sticky fingers and fat fingers problems.
Yes, exactly.
The idea that you couldn't use a microscopic tool to manipulate an atom because the atoms making up the tool would just chemically bond to the atom you're trying to move?
Right, the tool becomes part of the product. The atom would just stick to the microscopic tweezers.
So how does it get around that?
It bypasses those hurdles entirely. It functions as a mobile nanofactory. It creates highly specialized, isolated chemical environments within its own substrate to automatically execute chemical robotics at high speeds, atom by atom.
It's doing the math on the fly.
Yes. It calculates the necessary van der Waals forces, the covalent bonding energies, and it mechanizes the process of assembly.
To put that in perspective for you listening, human material science is basically like throwing a million Lego bricks into an industrial clothes dryer, turning it on high heat, and just crossing your fingers and hoping that a fully constructed, structurally sound house comes out the other end.
That is exactly our stochastic chemistry.
The entity, on the other hand, acts like an army of billions of microscopic master builders. They aren't tumbling around randomly in a vat. They're walking up to every individual atom, taking it and snapping it into a pre-programmed crystalline lattice with absolutely zero errors.
And that brings us to the deeply paranoid implication of programmable matter. Think about what this does to your fundamental understanding of reality.
Right, because we're used to thinking of matter as inert. A rock is a rock. A piece of steel is a piece of steel. It just sits there until a macroscopic force acts upon it.
But when every single molecule becomes an autonomous node, capable of sensing its environment, actuating a physical response, and collaborating with a trillion other nodes to rebuild a 15-kilometer-long asteroid from the inside out.
The line between matter and machine is just completely erased.
Completely. You are no longer living in a world of objects.
You are living in a world of dormant code that can be executed at any moment. Like the walls around you, the ground beneath you, your own ribs, they aren't solid things anymore.
No, they're just uncompiled hardware waiting for a new set of instructions.
Which is exactly what we see. It doesn't just execute code to build a static structure. It executes code to fundamentally alter how that structure interacts with the physical universe.
Exactly. So if you can control matter perfectly at the atomic level, you aren't just an architect. You can change how that matter interacts with the forces around it.
Which completely explains the Eros anomaly, because if you can flawlessly control every atom in a 15-kilometer-long rock, the next logical, terrifying question is what happens when you decide to accelerate that rock straight toward Venus?
The acceleration of Eros is where we see the entity stop merely manipulating matter and begin manipulating the foundational fabric of space-time itself.
Yeah, because when Eros altered its trajectory, it didn't just fire a thruster.
Not at all. It began accelerating at terrifying speeds, and in doing so, it exhibited behaviors that completely shatter Newton's third law of motion.
For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. That is the bedrock of how we move through space. If you want to go forward, you have to throw mass backward.
But Eros didn't do that.
There was no visible exhaust plume. There was no massive expulsion of reaction mass to push it forward. And even more impossibly, and I think this is the part that keeps physicists awake at night, there was zero heat generated by this movement and zero G-force felt by the occupants trapped inside.
The structural integrity alone should have failed.
Exactly. If you accelerate a rock that size that fast, it should just crumble into dust under its own structural shear. But it didn't.
The asteroid was dodging ships like a weightless ghost. It just decided to move, and it moved, no crushing G-forces. To the people inside, they were standing perfectly still while the universe rushed past them.
So to understand how this is even theoretically possible, we have to completely deconstruct our understanding of inertia, right?
We do. We instinctively feel that inertia is an intrinsic property of an object. If a boulder is heavy, it's hard to push. If you are in a car that accelerates rapidly, you are pushed back into your seat.
We think of mass and inertia as the same thing.
We do, but the Machian framework, derived from Mach's principle, proposes something radically different. It suggests that inertia is not intrinsic at all.
Oh, I need you to slow down here. We learn in grade school that an object's mass is just its mass. It's the amount of stuff in it. Are you telling me that a boulder isn't inherently hard to push just because it's big?
I am telling you that according to Mach's principle, inertia is supplied by the gravitational field of all the other matter in the universe.
What? Supplied by other matter?
Yeah, your body, your coffee cup, that boulder, they only have inertia, They only resist movement because they're interacting with the gravitational potential of the distant stars, galaxies, and cosmic dust.
That is a wild concept.
You are essentially connected to the rest of the universe by an invisible web of gravitational rubber bands. When you try to accelerate, those rubber bands pull back. That resistance is what you feel as inertia.
Okay, that is wild. So my coffee cup is only hard to slide across the table because the Andromeda galaxy is subtly pulling on it.
In a macroscopic universal sense, yes. Your mass is locally interacting with the global gravitational field.
Okay, so if inertia is just a relationship between an object and the rest of the universe, if you figure out how to sever that relationship or decouple an object from that universal gravitational potential, does the speed limit of the universe just cease to exist for you?
In a functional sense, yes.
Yeah.
If you decouple from that field, the rubber bands snap. You no longer experience resistance to acceleration.
Wow.
Physicists have explored the math behind this through the concept of transient mass fluctuations. The equation involves a variable called delta rho.
Whoa, delta rho. You're skipping over the terrifying part like it's a minor detail in a textbook. How does a rock actually fluctuate its mass without adding or losing physical atoms? You can't just wish yourself lighter.
You don't lose atoms. You manipulate internal energy. The physics code here involves rapidly fluctuating an object's mass density in strict synchronization with the mechanical vibrations. According to relativity, mass and energy are equivalent. The equation for transient mass fluctuation dictates that this fluctuation is proportional to the second derivative of the internal energy with respect to time, coupled with the gravitational constant and the speed of light squared.
I am definitely going to need an analogy for that because second derivative of internal energy is where most people's brains just blue screen.
Fair enough. Think of pumping your legs on a swing. You don't push off the ground to go higher, you are suspended in the air. But by shifting your center of mass, your internal energy distribution, at the exact right moment in the swing's arc, you steal momentum from the gravitational field.
Oh, I see. You're ratcheting yourself higher.
Exactly. The entity is doing this at the quantum level. By pulsating its internal energy density in sync with high-frequency mechanical vibrations and coupling that energy fluctuation to the universal gravitational potential, it doesn't need a thruster.
It exchanges momentum directly with the gravitational field of the universe itself.
Yes.
So it's essentially doing a quantum leg pump to swing itself across the solar system.
That is a very apt way to visualize it. It steals its movement from the distant stars, but it goes deeper. Theories like gravitation with a four-vector potential, often called G4V theory, suggest that the effective speed of light, and therefore the measure of inertia, can vary locally based on this gravitational potential.
Okay, so it's not just swinging.
No. By mathematically manipulating this potential around the asteroid, the entity can effectively hide arrows from the rest of the universe's mass. To the universe, arrows suddenly had no mass, and therefore no inertia, no rubber bands.
That is deeply unsettling. It means the physical resistance we feel in the world, the heavy, immovable reality of objects, is just a local field effect, and this operating system can simply turn that field off like a light switch.
Just nerfed the laws of physics.
Yeah, but escaping the confines of inertia is just the preamble. Moving a rock without thrust is impressive, but the true horror emerges when the entity doesn't just ignore macroscopic forces, but begins actively rewriting the mathematical constants that hold the microworld together.
Because bypassing inertia is a manipulation of gravity and momentum. It's playing with the macro physics. But to truly dominate an environment, to be the apex predator we mentioned earlier, you must have root access to the microworld.
You must be able to rewrite the fundamental constants of nature.
And the most critical of these is the fine structure constant.
The fine structure constant, denoted by the Greek letter alpha, the number that essentially dictates the strength of the electromagnetic interaction. It's approximately 1/137.036.
Right.
And for anyone listening, this isn't just a random number physicists pulled out of a hat. It is a dimensionless constant. It determines the exact distance, the exact binding energy between electrons and protons in every single atom in existence.
It is the tuning dial for chemistry. It is the reason matter is solid. It is the reason light interacts with matter the way it does.
So what happens if you mess with it?
If the value of alpha changes by even 4%, the delicate, intricate balance within the core of stars is completely destroyed. They can no longer fuse lighter elements into carbon or oxygen.
The biological building blocks of life become mathematically impossible.
Exactly. The universe would just be a sterile soup of fundamental particles. Life as we know it ceases to exist.
But hold on, changing a fundamental constant isn't like flipping a switch on a control panel. If you change alpha locally, wouldn't the sheer energy release of atoms losing their bonds just vaporize the entire area?
You would think so.
Right, like if electrons suddenly change their orbits, wouldn't everything just detonate in a nuclear flash?
It would if it were a clumsy, abrupt alteration.
Eh.
But we aren't talking about a clumsy machine. We are talking about an entity that controls matter atom by atom. Modern theoretical physics suggests that alpha might not actually be a static universal constant across the entirety of space-time, as we once comfortably believed.
Really?
Yeah, it may be a scaled quantity, a value that naturally rises only at the specific intersection of quantum mechanics, electromagnetism, and relativity.
So it's not a hard-coded number in the universe's software, it's a variable.
It is what physicists call the running of alpha. At extremely high energy scales, the coupling strength of the electromagnetic force actually changes. The entity, through its total control over local energy densities and the localized curvature of spacetime, is capable of artificially tuning this constant.
So it doesn't break the atom?
No, it gently shifts the parameters of reality so that the atom behaves differently. It possesses the universe's configuration file, and it is overwriting the code in real time.
Wow. So when we see the entity effortlessly shut down human nuclear fusion reactors on ships or alter the chemical bonds of incredibly dense materials around it, it isn't physically breaking the machinery.
Not at all.
It isn't reaching inside the reactor and pulling out wires or smashing containment fields. It is changing the conductivity of space itself. It is logging into the universe as an administrator and changing the value of alpha in a localized bubble.
Exactly. The human engineers are looking at their fusion drive, completely baffled as to why the magnetic containment is failing and the plasma is cooling. All their instruments say the drive should be working perfectly.
But the drive is operating in a pocket of space where the laws of electromagnetism have been subtly nerfed.
The operating system just dialed down the fine structure constant by a fraction of a percent. The fusion reaction starves because the underlying physics permitting fusion have been temporarily revoked.
That is so terrifying because it renders all human technology completely obsolete in an instant. You can build the most advanced fusion drive, the thickest, most impenetrable composite armor, the most devastating railguns. But if the entity just tweaks the fine structure constant in your immediate vicinity, your fusion drive stops fusing.
Your impenetrable armor suddenly loses its atomic cohesion and falls apart like wet sand.
Your railgun slugs turn into harmless clouds of unbound protons. You can't fight an enemy that can delete the laws of physics that your weapons rely on.
It is the ultimate asymmetrical warfare. You are bringing a sword to a fight where the opponent can simply redefine what a solid object is.
But of course, if you have root access to reality, if you can change atomic bonds on a whim and completely nullify inertia to move a mountain without a thruster, you don't waste your time building faster ships to cross the vast empty void of space.
No, you don't bother with the speed of light.
You build a backdoor. You build a shortcut through a higher dimension.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the megastructures.
The ring gates. These are constructs that are roughly 1,000 kilometers in diameter, positioned at the outer edges of solar systems. But to call them doors or wormholes is a gross oversimplification of the physics involved.
Right. Usually when people talk about wormholes, they use that incredibly tired sci-fi cliche. You know the one.
The folded paper.
Yes. The scientist takes a flat piece of paper, draws a dot on one side and a dot on the other, and then folds the paper in half and pokes a pencil through it. We've seen it in a dozen movies. But that doesn't actually help you understand what it looks like from the inside, or the horror of what you were actually doing to space.
The folded paper analogy fails because it implies empty space is a pliable physical object you can just bend with your hands. We have to stop using that. It's much more accurate and terrifying to look at it through the lens of Brane cosmology.
Okay, let's break that down. Brane with an entirely different spelling, B-R-A-N-E, short for membrane.
Correct. Imagine the entire universe, everything we can see, touch, and measure with our instruments, all the stars, galaxies, and empty space, is just data running along the copper traces of a vast, infinitely flat computer motherboard.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
That motherboard is our three-dimensional universe. We are electrons trapped on that flat board. It takes a long time to travel from the CPU to the memory bank by following the copper paths.
Because we are bound by the 2D surface of the board, we can only move along the prescribed paths.
Exactly. Now imagine someone comes along with a soldering iron and a long piece of wire. They solder one end of the wire to the CPU, and they arc the wire up and off the motherboard, through the empty air above it and solder the other end directly to the memory bank.
To the electrons on the board. This makes no sense. The wire leaves their universe entirely and re-enters it somewhere else. The ring gates are that wire.
Yes.
And the empty air above the motherboard. What is that in Brane cosmology?
That is the bulk. In these physics models, specifically the Randall-Sundrum models of five-dimensional gravity, our three-dimensional universe is just a membrane floating within a larger four-dimensional hypervolume known as the bulk.
And this isn't just wild late-night science fiction speculation. This is an actual rigorous physics model used to solve one of the biggest mysteries in science, the hierarchy problem, right?
Yes. The hierarchy problem asks why gravity is so absurdly weak compared to the other fundamental forces. A tiny magnet can pick up a paperclip, completely defeating the gravitational pull of the entire planet Earth. Why is gravity so pathetic?
Brane cosmology offers a solution to that. Gravity isn't actually weak, it's just that gravity, unlike electromagnetism or the strong nuclear force, is not confined to our three brane.
It leaks. It radiates out into the four-dimensional bulk, spreading its force over a massively larger volume. We only experience a tiny, diluted fraction of its true strength.
So the architects of this operating system, these ring builders, they understood this architecture. They didn't just build rings of matter to act like stargates. They engineered dynamic topological defects in the fabric of our three brane.
They tore a hole in the motherboard and forced a connection through the bulk.
They forced a truncation of space-time. And to keep that truncation open, to keep that solder wire from snapping under the immense pressure of universal topology trying to heal itself, requires an energy output that is almost beyond human comprehension.
We aren't talking about planetary power sources anymore.
We aren't talking about tapping the geothermal core of a world.
We are talking about Dyson-scale energetics. To power the ring network and maintain the slow zone, which is essentially an artificially enlarged pocket universe carved directly out of the brane, a hub where all these higher dimensional wires meet. The ring station at the center must redirect power on the order of 3.8 times 10 to the 26th watts.
Let me just interject to contextualize that number. 3.8 times 10 to the 26 watts. That is the total absolute energy output of an entire G-class star. Every photon, every flare, every particle of radiation a sun emits in all directions, captured at 100% efficiency.
It requires the equivalent of a Dyson swarm with the capture area of over 3.1 billion square meters. And it isn't generating this power locally.
It's constantly funneling potential energy from the higher dimensional bulk to keep the manifold stable.
The ring station is a cosmic tent pole, holding open a bubble of space inside a dimension where it has no right to exist.
It's a level of engineering that makes human civilization look like a colony of bacteria trying to reverse engineer a supercomputer. We are flying our little tin can ships through these gates, marveling at the shortcut, completely unaware of the raging cosmic machinery keeping the walls from crushing us.
Here's the narrative twist, the detail that turns this from awe-inspiring to absolutely horrifying.
If the operating system is constantly leaking massive amounts of energy into the 4D bulk to build and power its shortcuts, what exactly is living in the empty air above the motherboard?
This is where the hard physics of the transit gates collides with the concept of an ecosystem. We have the phenomenon that human pilots began calling the Dutchman effect.
Human ships passing through the ring gates would inexplicably vanish, and I want to emphasize how terrifying this was. There was no debris left behind, no distress signals ever reached the other side. A ship would enter the gate on one side, and it just wouldn't come out the other. Total erasure from our universe.
At first, everyone thought it was a malfunction, a glitch in the alien operating system. We were using technology we didn't understand, so obviously it must be breaking down.
But it's not a glitch at all, is it?
No, it is a mass energy threshold. It is a strict physics equation rooted directly in Einstein's E equals mc squared.
Wait, so the gates have a built-in speed limit or a weight limit?
A combination of both.
Yeah.
Mass and energy are interchangeable. The gates have a deeply embedded automated throttling mechanism designed to maintain the structural integrity of the entire network. Think of it like a pressure valve on a steam pipe.
Okay.
When a ship passes through, it introduces mass, but it also introduces the immense energy of its fusion drive plume. When the mass energy flux, the combined load of a ship's physical weight and the sheer energy it is burning, passing through a gate within a specific time frame, exceeds a critical limit. The system realizes it cannot safely process the transit.
Because if it tries, the local topological defect will destabilize and the gate will collapse.
Exactly.
So what does the system do? It just dumps the excess load.
It automatically shunts that excess mass energy directly into the bulk. It forcefully ejects the ship from our three-dimensional membrane into the four-dimensional hypervolume to save the gate.
And that is the true horror. It dumps the toxic waste of our transits into the empty air above the motherboard. But it turns out that air isn't empty.
Yeah.
Our shortcuts are bleeding high-energy radiation and occasionally entire fully crewed starships directly into someone else's living room.
And those localized blackouts. The phenomena where human consciousness is temporarily suspended across entire solar systems. The physical void bullets that appear out of nowhere and perfectly erase spherical sections of matter, leaving no heat and no radiation.
Those aren't natural cosmic weather events. They aren't quirks of gate travel.
They are defensive retaliations. The entities residing in the higher dimensional space, the beings we colloquialized as the Goths, are perceiving these energetic shunts as incursions, perhaps even as active attacks.
Right, try to view it from their perspective in a four-dimensional reality. Our three-dimensional transit network is an irritant. It is a parasite, puncturing their space, bleeding heat and noise into their domain.
The vanishing ships, the blackouts, the void bullets. These are the Goths swatting back at the 2D intruders. They are projecting energy down into our lower dimensions specifically to disrupt quantum activity.
To disrupt consciousness. They figured out that the things building the gates, the things using the gates, rely on quantum state coherence to think. So they just spray a localized disruptor field to turn our brains off.
It is the ultimate cosmic horror.
We found a backdoor through the universe, we built an entire interstellar civilization on top of it, and we didn't realize it ran straight through a hornet's nest of higher dimensional predators.
Sure.
But the ring builders, the architects of this massive operating system, they knew, didn't they?
They knew intimately. They fought an entire war with these entities eons before humanity ever existed. And this leads us to the most staggering piece of physics engineering in the entire archive, the Tacoma trap.
I remember reading about this and just having to put the notes down and walk away. It is so utterly insane.
The Tacoma trap demonstrates that the builders were not just victims of the Goths, they were judo masters of physics. They understood the mechanics of the Goths' retaliation perfectly.
They knew that any significantly high-energy event near a gate would trigger a localized swat from the higher dimension.
So they decided to weaponize that reaction. They found a specific ring gate in a system we call Tacoma, and they physically moved it. They aligned it perfectly with the polar axis of a neutron star.
Let's contextualize a neutron star. This is a stellar remnant left over after a supernova. It is matter compressed to such a degree that electrons and protons are crushed together into pure neutrons. A single teaspoon of neutron star material weighs billions of tons.
And the builders found one that was sitting on a hair trigger. It was right on the mathematical edge of the Tolman-Oppenheimer-Volkoff limit. It was a fraction of a percent away from collapsing entirely into a black hole.
They set an automated trap that waited for millions of years. When human activity eventually, inevitably, triggered a localized response from the Goths in that system, the trap sprang.
The Goths' higher dimensional intrusion into our universe manifests physically as a massive, sudden increase in quantum virtual particle activity.
Yeah.
The Goths swatted at the system, but by swatting, they injected virtual mass into the space around the neutron star.
And that tiny injection of extra mass pushed that delicate hair-trigger neutron star over the edge. It collapsed.
Instantly.
And when a neutron star collapses into a black hole, it doesn't just go quietly into the dark. It fires a gamma ray burst from its magnetic poles, the brightest, most energetic electromagnetic event known to exist in the universe.
A beam of focused radiation that can sterilize solar systems thousands of light years away.
And because the builders had meticulously aligned the gate to perfectly face the pole of the star, that gamma ray burst fired straight into the ring. It hit the gate. It instantly exceeded the mass energy threshold by orders of magnitude.
The gate's automated system engaged, and it shunted the entirety of a stellar collapse directly into the bulk.
The builders used the collapsing geometry of our universe as a cosmic shotgun. They weaponized the fundamental life cycle of stars to blast the higher dimension. They baited the Goths into pulling the trigger on themselves.
It's a breathtaking application of scale. They didn't build a laser. They used a dying star and the automated safety protocols of their own transit network to deliver a lethal blow across dimensional boundaries.
Which brings us to the terrifying realization of what this operating system truly represents. The protomolecule, the gates, the manipulation of inertia, none of it is magic. We want to call it magic because it makes us feel better.
But it is simply physics pushed to an extreme where matter, energy, and the very dimensions of spacetime are utterly programmable by an administrator.
And it forces us to look at the ultimate fate of the ring builders themselves. Because they didn't just build these machines and die off, they transitioned their entire species.
They realized that biological baryonic matter is too fragile, too susceptible to the Goth's quantum disruption. So they utilized quantum non-locality and theories akin to orchestrated objective reduction.
Or CHAIR. The theory that consciousness doesn't arise from chemical synapses, but from quantum computations occurring within the microscopic structures of cells.
Precisely. They decoupled their minds from biology entirely. They uploaded their collective consciousness into the Hadro Diamond, a Jupiter-sized memory repository made of pure, structurally perfect carbon.
They became what the archetypes refer to as rich light. They transitioned from a physical, vulnerable substrate into pure, distributed information. They became the operating system.
And that leaves us with a deeply unsettling question to mull over. Right now, humanity is rapidly approaching what futurists call the convergent singularity.
The point where we begin merging our own biological brains with digital transglobal networks. We are trying to conquer death. We are trying to make our own consciousness substrate independent.
We think we're charting our own unique, brilliant evolutionary path, but are we?
Or, by turning our minds into distributed data and our bodies into programmable matter, are we simply making ourselves perfectly compatible hardware for a dormant transgalactic operating system that is just waiting for the right moment to recompile us?